Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers, so we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
Steve, welcome back to the podcast. It's been a little bit since you've been on, right?
It has.
That's
why is that?
I apologize. It's all about, listen, if you guys are listening, do Steve a favor and download this episode another few more times. Leave it on while you're sleeping just so that the download numbers ramp up.
Right.
Steve, that's not how we pick guests. It's not at all. But you're a part of our team and our organization here at the Youth Worker Community. This question, I'm really fired up about this question. I'm so excited for that because this is honestly, we get this from youth workers when we travel. We get this from volunteers. We get this from point leaders. We get point leaders that are wrestling with this question as it pertains to their volunteers. Mm-hmm. And so generally speaking, I think in our day and age, there's a hesitancy. We do not want to burn people out. We don't want to, encroach upon, break boundaries or anything like that. And so is your ministry or is my ministry stealing time from my family? Whatever that, home, my rhythm, whatever the thing is. What do you say to people when they're wrestling through that question, Steve?
That is a great question. Because, it is the thing that we all wrestle with, right? If you're going to say yes to something, it means you're saying no to something else, right? That's inevitable. And typically for most youth workers, the no that is most felt is, am I saying no to my family too often? Mm. And so what do I say to them is, well, you know what, this is a bigger conversation, right?
Maybe is it worth separating into categories? Because I know you get this conversation lots. Yeah. Is it primarily with staff people that are on staff teams, or do you hear as well from volunteers that are kind of dealing with it?
I think we hear it from everyone, and I think everyone kind of carries it in a different way.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I think I'd like to approach it with first. Why is it that we ask? What is the pressure that we feel? Because sometimes that pressure, sometimes the time away from my family, it can be that impenetrable shield. Maybe I just want to say no, and no one's going to challenge me if I say, nah, I can't give up that time with my family, and that becomes an impenetrable shield. But what I might actually be wrestling through is, I just really I feel insecure. Will kids like me? And so it's kind of the easy way to let myself off the hook. But in reality, there is a finite number of hours in our day. And so we need to wrestle through that and balance it and take inventory of where we're investing time. But there are a couple thoughts, Jeremy, that I would love to just share with people that have been a part of my thought process and the thought process of a lot of others as we approach balancing my time spent with my ministry and with my family. And here's one philosophical kind of teeter-totter that I've kind of used. Is my time in my ministry a time that my family feels as my absence from them, or do they feel like I am representing them? Oh. So when I leave the house or whatever, do they feel that I'm going out as a representative of the family to serve God's kingdom, like he's called us as a household to do, or is dad going and giving the attention that I want for me to someone else? So I just want to get a bit of a pulse on that in my family, because I think, if I can keep my ear to the ground and how is my absence being felt by my family, that's probably one of the biggest barriers.
Well, that's a fascinating question to wrestle with. I've not thought about that before, but that's a me problem. So if my family is feeling my absence as this is, that this is where you are leading me, Steve, you sneaky. But if my family is feeling my absence and they don't see me going to do ministry as a part of our calling as a family, I get to change that actually. Actually makes me think, if you've heard, John Acuff, he's an author. He posted just recently about how he used to, when he would travel for work, make a big stink about how much he's going to miss his family, and it's so sad that he has to go on the road. And he kind of built this expectation at his home that this is a terrible thing that your dad has to leave and go to work. And he realized he was teaching them something about work and about his job that really he didn't want to in the end. And so by reframing the conversation, hey, isn't this exciting that your dad's got a great job he loves? Isn't this exciting that he can go and provide for us? All of a sudden changes the nuance of how your family experiences even your absence. So, okay, so I'm now thinking about this in light of my own story, and I'm sure everybody listening is processing in light of theirs. How would you start to shift if somebody's like, yeah, at this point, my spouse, my parents, like everybody thinks about this as just straight absence. What would they start to do to move it towards mission?
Right. And so those are great conversations to even introduce, like, hey, how do you experience my absence?
You start by asking about it first.
Yeah, ask about it. Like, what do you feel when I'm gone?
Yeah.
Because that could be different for everyone. Everyone needs your presence in a bit of a different way.
Yeah.
It might be there's an emotional need. I just need you present. It feels like you're always absent because your mind is always on something else. And so then I go, oh, well, I just need to make times in the day where they can be confident I'm fully present and there for them in places where it's most usable to them. And sometimes I would show up for my family when they were off on a different task and stuff like that. I was like, hey, I was here, there, and there. I was like, but I was doing the laundry. I was doing this, those sorts of things. So just checking in with the family and say, hey, how do you experience my absence? How would you like me to be present? And that will actually lead me to a couple things in just a little bit, Jer. But I think that that's one of the introductory sort of questions because, because just even back to your point, we start to frame up the language around our absences too. Yeah. I think it becomes, I was always really careful when I would be leaving the house as to what I would be saying as I was going. Was I going, I would tend to say, hey, I'm going to church. Because church is something that we do together as a family instead of I'm going to work or I'm going to this, and your family might use different language than my family might use too. But
it makes me even think as a point leader, if I'm going to recruit volunteers, I'm now changing in my internal script of what I invite them into. Hey, could your family commission you? Could your family actually lay hands on, commission you for the work of being in this ministry with this next generation? Would they send you as a missionary from your home into the lives of these other kids? That just changes everything.
Jared, did you ever do anything? Oh, maybe I'm exposing.
I did nothing intentional. No, I've been awful at this. This is the inadequacies of my own leadership now, Steve.
Yeah, right.
You figured out.
And I'm just wondering, did you ever do anything for the families of those whose someone would represent their family?
No, I did nothing. But this would be so smart to do it that way.
I think as a church, we would do a big family event sort of thing, get rent bouncy stuff and whatever and stuff. But then
for your volunteers, like for your
for the volunteers. That was a once, but I think they blended it with so many different things. I don't know if it was really felt as, oh, we get this because dad or mom is a youth worker or a youth leader or whatever that might be. But hey, something that we can improve on in our own lives, Jeremy.
Well, you've changed my mind on something already. So I don't know if you have anything else wise to say, but I've gotten my wisdom I feel like I've got something, but keep going. Keep going.
So I want to just frame this up because I've talked to so many youth workers who are wrestling with the tension that I think I might be giving too much to ministry and neglecting my family. And you know what? Whenever we're balancing those things, we usually count hours when we do that. And I feel like counting hours is a hard way to live life because if you're anything like me, Jeremy, life has seasons. Sometimes where I have seasons where I got to give more time to one thing and less time to the other. And hopefully our lives have some flexibility where we can compensate for those different things. But as youth workers, I find that youth workers are often people who are giving a tremendous amount of time to their ministries and always carrying this weight of guilt and always thinking it's stealing from their families. But this is probably the way that I start to reframe even my own thoughts as to making sure that I was really faithful to serve my family. And instead of just counting hours, which is important, don't get me wrong. Don't mishear me. It's important to make sure that, if you're doing 120 hours a week, it's, you got to get some sleep or whatever. Instead of just counting hours, I also added to that equation there's 4 times of the day that I feel are particularly sacred, and time absence at those particular times, time spent away from my family or absence during those particular sacred times were felt disproportionately to the number of hours or minutes even that I was away during those times.
Okay. So what are those 4 times?
Those 4 times, I think the most sacred time of the day is nighttime. when I would put my kids to bed, or when I'd say goodnight to my wife or whatever, nighttime is probably the most sacred time. If I'm absent when they go to bed, that is going to be felt most.
And so let's just qualify this, because I know we got people listening and you don't have kids, or you might not be married, or you might have grandkids, or you might different stages of life. So these 4 times are the 4 times that you felt. I think it's probably worth saying, hey, you should be a student of your own family and life to figure out where the critical sacred times are. Yeah. I think the question is just, to ask, hey, what is the most critical time during the week or during the day? And so you discovered, and this is, I'm with you too. Yeah, bedtime for the kids, which changes over seasons. But yeah, that's a critical time. Okay, I like that.
Right. Yeah. Closing the day. The next one is meal times.
Okay, yeah.
And I think we've as youth workers, we've talked about those sorts of things. We know that meal times, breaking bread, right, is a significant time. There is something very sacred about sharing meals together. There's something different about, and I'm sure that there's some sort of psychological, physiological, or spiritual thing about breaking bread. But I just found that the more meal times that I spent away from my family, those were felt disproportionately to the amount of time that was absent. Is if there was a space empty at the table when we would gather for a meal. And also in reverse, when I was present, those were important processing times.
Yeah. And I'll say, as somebody, you've got kids that are grown or they're older. Yeah. As a parent of younger kids, it doesn't feel sacred or important because it's just crazy. Right. But I know from, again, research and from the wisdom of people that have gone before, those are still worthwhile fighting for, even though it's like there is nothing critical happening here. This is just a fight of trying to convince these monsters to eat this lettuce or broccoli.
Right.
But that's okay.
Hey, Jared, you that brings up such a great point, though, is sometimes we gauge the effectiveness of that time by the productivity that we feel. But I tell you, you become absent from that time, and I'm just saying that it's felt disproportionately to other times. Yeah. You know what? And we just got to remind ourselves, hey, in the chaos of all of that, we might just say, hey, what are we really producing in this time? And we might say, it just seems like we're just staying alive. But I think that those times are far more significant than we could ever imagine. You know, 2 more times, Jared, of the day that I feel are really sacred. And those are the send-off times and the welcome home times, the times where I say goodbye to my kids when they leave the house and when they return, or any family member. I keep on coming back to kids because I think these are often the ones that we think of first when we think about time and stealing from our family or whatever. But my hellos and goodbyes, that's another way to frame it. That's how my counselor framed it for me, is just, hey, really think about how you say hello and how you say goodbye to your family. And then finally, if I'm absent from some of those different times, I would just prioritize a midday check-in, whatever way that would look, whether that's a text message, or if you can do a lunchtime with one of your family members and stuff like that. Those times just carry more weight than others.
Mm-hmm. So the idea being, hey, these are 4 important times. And so when you're measuring what time commitments are and where you're at and all that kind of stuff, just to make sure you recognize these high water marks count. And so if you're missing them, just know that means something. And if you're able to be present and then still disengage at different other points, you can't be present for all 4 every day, right, with everybody. That's not what you're saying. You're correct?
Yeah. So as a youth worker, it's just as a human, I would just be tracking in my mind as I look at my calendar. I was like, hey, when am I absent from my family? And if I'm finding that I'm consistently absent during these sacred times of the day, these would be the times that I would prioritize in protecting. Or if there was ways that I could compensate for them, I would just want to make sure that I was as present for as many of these as possible, or adapt them in different ways. You know, as a youth worker, often youth programs were evening based, right? And we know that, like I said before, I felt that was probably one of the most sacred times of the day. So if I was going to give up an evening with my family, I would make sure that I would deeply, deeply protect other times of the day to compensate for that. So let's say, for instance, if I knew I was going to do a Monday night program and a Wednesday night program, on those days, I would tend to prioritize being fully present at supper time on those days. And here's what I mean by fully present. Sometimes I would extend my workday till kind of like, because you're doing your last minute stuff, prepping for whatever, and maybe you're working another job or whatever, and you run home, you scarf some food, you go, at least I was there at supper, and you whip out the door and you go to your youth program. And I know my family would say, hey, Steve, appreciate that you came and you're physically present, but you brought with you such a sense of urgency and anxiety that your presence wasn't really helpful to us. Actually, it created more attention to your absence because you were just flying in, flying through and stuff. And so it wasn't really helpful. So then as I kind of gave that some consideration, what I actually did was I was like, hey, and this was the flexibility that I had as a point worker. And I realized that our volunteers listening here might not have this same flexibility. But I started to prioritize coming home on those days when just before my kids would come home from school, so that I would have a nice big 2-hour block. So I could be chill. I wasn't scarfing. And so it meant that I had to be more disciplined in my planning. And I had to kind of, get to, if it wasn't done by the time the kids were going to get home from school, well, hey, that was on me. And I needed to figure that out in future weeks. But if I wanted that time to be felt well by my family, I would just try to make sure that that was time where I could decompress. I could be fully present. I could sit at the table and we could process life. We could just ask me about your day and that sort of thing. And yeah.
I love that. Okay, so we're thinking about sacred times of the day. We're thinking about how we frame our absence. And is there anything else that you would encourage us as we're thinking about, hey, are we losing time to our ministries from our family? Like as we're thinking that through, is there anything else?
Yeah, well, Jared, just one thing, just to make sure that it's clear and stuff. If there's anything else that someone is hearing from this, is just thinking about, the times that I give to my family that are just felt at a different level than others. And I want to just come back to the hellos and goodbyes. Other times when I'm spending a lot of time away, also just thinking about when my family would leave the house, if I could be the voice that sends them off, those times are felt deeply as well. So if I'm absent from all of those times, I start to feel like an absent dad. So what I'm just saying here is if you can think about these 4 sacred times of the day, and if you have to turn down the aisle in some, turn down the dial on some, if you can turn it up in a few other ways, you can actually give disproportionately more back to your family by just being intentional in the times when you can be present. So if I'm going to be absent, because like nighttime is significant because that's the time where, especially with kids, where they reflect on the day and you kind of just put the bookend on the day. And if your presence can be there, helping them process all that, reflecting on the day, those become really significant contributions to our kids and or families or whatever. Yeah,
well, it makes me think that sometimes, and this is maybe just me, and maybe this is nobody else's issue, but like I might fight for boundaries around time and with family, but then when I'm actually with my family, it's actually not that I'm leveraging it super well.
Right.
And so this is the cautiousness that I always have around these kind of conversations, because I think sometimes the line of, well, I got to prioritize my family in this season, it's not that I'm doubting it, but I just want to know that, hey, if that's the case, then are you actually able to really prioritize? Or is it just a matter of, well, I just really need to go home and I want to watch some Netflix and eat some ice cream and tune my kids out. And like, well, if you're saying no to being a part of the mission of our church because you want to eat ice cream and watch The Office again, that's probably something worth sacrificing for this. So it's just trying to understand, okay, what are we actually talking? And hey, the reason I say that is because this is my struggle of I need to be really clear when I'm at home. I want to be fully present and engaged with my kids.
Right.
And that, when we do these other things and when I'm gone for maybe days at a time, that sure, it is a cost to my family. But I want to make sure that when I'm actually around, that I really am around and present. And that's just, again, that's my own thing maybe. Maybe nobody struggles with that. Maybe nobody else struggles with ice cream and Netflix.
It's probably only the two of us, Jeremy.
You're in on that struggle too. Okay, good.
And that's really where that first question, hey, how has my absence felt?
Yeah.
And you might include some of those there might be like, hey, Jeremy, yeah, you were gone on these evenings. And then when you did come home, you sat on your phone and played Candy Crush or whatever people play these days.
Yeah. Hello, 2007? Candy Crush?
I figured that would be good for a laugh. Right?
All right. Yeah. Anything else though that you want to get us to wrestle with, Steve? These are really helpful things to process.
Yeah. So in addition to counting your hours, if that's been your only gauge for how much you're stealing from your family in terms of time, if hour counting is your only measure, I would just encourage you to think about the sacred times of the day. Are you present during those times? How does your family feel your absence? Have those conversations. And I think you're going to discover that your family will be engaged in your ministry if you're really attentive to those key things.
Yeah. This is brilliant. Folks, you guys are hearing obviously a small segment of this bigger conversation. And so if there's anything that you think about around this, if you've got questions on burnout, if you've got thoughts that we should challenge or talk about other elements to this, or you've seen people ask too much of you as a volunteer and you want us to deal with all of those things, I put my contact info in the show notes, and I would love to hear from you, and we can dive into those in a future conversation. But for right now, Steve, thanks so much for getting us to think about these things, wrestle with them, and until next time when we have you back again, which will be sooner than the last time. Let's just say
Let's do that.
Yeah. But we'll see you guys all, and enjoy your ministry. You guys are making an eternal difference.